Practical Anarchy, A Guide to Self-Determination, Dicky. Section 53, Resistance within Religions. Not all religion has been about obedience to hierarchy. At different points in history, religious faith has also provided resources for resisting domination. Liberation theology in Latin America is perhaps the clearest example. From the 1960s onwards, Catholic priests and lay people worked alongside peasants and workers, insisting that faith should mean siding with the poor, insisting against oppression. Figures like Gustavo Gutierrez argued that the gospel demanded structural change, not passive acceptance of poverty. Their communities practiced forms of collective organisation that often looked closer to anarchism than to church hierarchy, though they still remained tied to institutional religion. Similarly, the Quakers, the Religious Society of Friends, rejected clergy and emphasised consensus decision-making. The meetings often ran on principle that truth emerges collectively, not through a priest or ruler. In practice, this meant horizontal assemblies that resonate with anarchist practice. Their refusal to swear oaths, pay tithes, or participate in war set them apart from the dominant culture. Yet even here, structures of authority crept back in over time, showing the difficulty of escaping hierarchy entirely. In Asia, strands of Buddhism have leaned towards anarchic forms. Some modern writers speak of Buddhist anarchism, a vision where compassion and mindfulness replace coercion and domination. From the 1960s onwards, figures such as Gary Snyder and later engaged Buddhists like Thich Nhat Hanh emphasised decentralisation, self-organisation and resistance to militarism. These tendencies showed how spiritual traditions could nourish bottom-up organisation against violence and authoritarianism. The problem is that such movements rarely escape the weight of the traditions they grow from. Liberation theology was condemned by the Vatican. Quakers eventually developed their own institutional hierarchies and compromises. Even Buddhist anarchist currents have often been sidelined by more authoritarian forms of religion, especially when monasteries are tied to states. In the end, while faith has sometimes been a spark of resistance, it tends to get drawn back into the hierarchical systems. This reinforces the broader theme of this book. Glimpses of freedom appear even within institutions of domination, but without a break from hierarchy itself, they remain partial. Just as shown earlier on how wage slavery survives beneath the promise of free labour, and how advertising cloaks coercion and choice, so too these earlier sections show that religion, even when it inspires justice, often reverts to structures of control. Section 54, Why Religion Must Go Before a Truly Anarchist World Can Emerge. Religion has always been more than private belief. It is a psychological state. Like the state itself, it works for obedience, guilt and hierarchy. Priests and prophets claim to divine truth, demanding submission to rules that cannot be questioned. As Bakunin argued in God and the State, the idea of God sanctifies servitude by placing ultimate authority beyond human control. This makes religion one of the most enduring and effective tools of control. Even where it has inspired resistance, as shown earlier, the gravitational pull back to hierarchy is hard to escape. If anarchism is about dismantling all structures of domination, then dogma cannot be left standing. Without challenging the authority of sacred texts, clergy or divine sanction, freedom will always be partial. Emma Goldman insisted that religion, along with property and government, form the trinity of oppression, each reinforcing the other, and each requiring dismantling. Just as was shown earlier about wage slavery lurks beneath the promise of free labour, so too religion hides chains beneath the promise of salvation. Contemporary critics have made similar arguments from outside the anarchist tradition. Richard Dawkins described religion as a virus of the mind, replicating obedience across generations. Christopher Hitchens went further, arguing in God is Not Great that religion not only poisons personal freedom, but actively fuels violence and repression. From earlier perspective, anarchist or secular humanist, dogma appears as a mechanism for curbing thought and stifling autonomy. The comparison with earlier sections on advertising is instructive. Advertising manufactures desire and compliance without overt coercion. Religion manufactures obedience and guilt in the same way. Both operate in the realm of psychology, shaping behaviour through invisible levers, which makes them doubly powerful and doubly insidious. This is not a call to erase meaning, ritual, or spirituality. Many traditions have offered glimpses of cooperation, reverence for nature, or practices of care. But when tied to hierarchy, they become cages. To move beyond states and markets, we must also move beyond gods and masters. The argument prepares us for chapter 7, where we turn to the trap of party politics, another form of faith, in leaders rather than gods, and then to chapter 8, which explores what society might look like if we left money and religion behind altogether. Section 55, chapter conclusion, breaking faith, reclaiming freedom. The argument of this chapter has been clear. Religion is not only a private matter of belief, but also a system of authority that mirrors the state and markets in its reliance on obedience, guilt and hierarchy. From priest-kings to televangelists, sacred orders have sanctified inequality and blessed violence. Even where resistance movements such as liberation theology or Buddhist anarchism have emerged, they've rarely escaped being pulled back into structures of dogma and command. 3 take-home points stand out. First, religion functions as a psychological state, governing minds and behaviour through unseen levers, much like advertising, as I'd analysed earlier. Second, the alignment of religion with wealth and violence, from Vatican banks to prosperity gospel, from the Crusades to Israel-Palestine, shows that faith repeatedly legitimates domination. Third, while glimpses of bottom-up spirituality exist, the overall pattern is one of authority disguised as transcendence. For anarchists, this makes religion a barrier that must be dismantled if genuine freedom is to emerge. As Goldman argued, property, government and religion form a trinity of oppression. Bakunin put it more starkly: if God really existed, it would be necessary to abolish him. Without confronting this dimension of power, anarchism risks leaving intact one of the most resilient forms of hierarchy. Looking forward, this sets the stage for chapter 7. If religion is the faith in God, and markets are the faith in money, then parliamentary democracy is faith in leaders. Each promises salvation, order or representation, and each delivers subordination. The next chapter asks why so many remain trapped in party politics, and whether democracy, as we know it, can even deliver freedom.